Welcome to Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, hosted by Todd DeVoe, where planning meets reality.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And I am Todd DeVoe, and I have been involved in responding to emergencies and disasters since 1989, a long time now. And I've been when I started out in emergency management, I started out in logistics, and since then I became an educator teaching in post-secondary level. And learning and sharing what I've learned is a passion for me. So welcome to Business Continuity Today, where we'll continue to learn together. Now, before we get into our topic of the first principles of thinking, I want to first do a little quick tribute to the man who got me involved in emergency management as a volunteer firefighter in Slingerlands, New York, where I grew up. And his name is Bill Eck, Chief Eck. And he passed away this week. And Bill had a profound impact on where I am today as a human being, taking me from some young kid who just graduated from high school to where I am today in my career as an emergency manager and as a professor. So, Bill, we will definitely miss you, and thank you for everything you've done for our community and for me, especially. Thank you so much. So, Bill, rest in peace. We got to watch. So today we're talking about first principles of thinking. So first principles of thinking is the best way to explain it. It's a way to reverse engineer complicated problems and unleash the creative possibilities. And so when you think of the first principles of thinking, the idea breaks down complicated problems into basic elements, and then you reassemble them from the ground up. And the biggest question that you ask when you start doing this thing is the question of why. Why are things happening? And before we went on air, I was sharing a story. It's a parable, I suppose, of a mom who is teaching her daughter how to bake bread. And in this, I'm sure you guys probably heard the story again, but it really fits into what we're talking about today. In this, the mom says, "Hey, okay, we're going to put the bread into the oven, and we're putting a pan of water." And the little girl says, "Well, Mom, why do we put the pan of water in?" She goes, "I don't know. That's how my mom taught me. Let me call her and ask her." So they call up Grandma, and Grandma says, "I don't know. That's how my mom taught me. Let's call her and ask her." So they call Great Grandma, and Great Grandma says, "Well, you know what? I'm not sure why you guys do it, but my stove was broken, or my oven was broken." So that's the concept. Sometimes we do things just because it's the way it's always been done, and people really don't understand the why. So asking the why becomes a very critical question when you're looking at processes. And this is the approach that was used by Aristotle and is now being used by Elon Musk. And we'll get into Musk's story a little bit here in a minute, but I want to kind of go through a couple more things. So also the concept of first principles of thinking is it allows people to cut through the fog of the shoddy reasoning for inadequate analogies and see the opportunities that they miss. And that goes back to the story of the bread, right? What is the reasoning behind there? And it took the child to say why. Why does this happen in this way? So the first principles as a foundation, what we're doing is we're assuming that these things stand alone, right? But when we deduce with first principles, we look at other ideas and other views on things, and we move the assumptions and the propositions. So Aristotle, writing in the first principle, said, "In every systematic inquiry or method where our first principles or causes or elements, knowledge and science result from acquiring knowledge of these. For we think we know something just in case we acquire the knowledge from the primary cause." The primary first principle is all the way to the elements. So what he's saying there is he's getting down into the nitty-gritty, into the elements of what the thing is. And breaking down the problem into its basic elements gets you to the first principles of thinking. So he later conducted that the idea of knowledge is defined in the first principle as the first basis from which the thing is known. What is the essence of it, right? What is the nuclear of it, the granular of it? So in a search for the first principle, it's not unique in philosophy. All great thinkers do it, right? So reasoning by first principle removes the impurity of the assumptions and the conventions. So we remove those assumptions and conventions, right? So the ideas, so breaking outside of the box, right? We hear this all the time. We're going to think outside the box. This is what first principle thinking is. It's thinking outside the box. So this what remains is the essentials. Right? You take away all the packaging, the essentials, and that's what remains. And so it's the best mental models that we can use to improve our thinking, because it essentially allows you to use reasoning that might, lead you to the right path, right? Because if you're using something that's other than, it's going to lead you to astray, right? So the best principles of this, and I'm sure we've all learned this at some point, is the concept of Socratic questioning, right? And so Socratic questioning can be used to establish first principles through stringent analysis. So it isn't just questioning to ask questions, right? It's not the child of asking the why to ask why, right? We'll get into the childlike here in a second. But it's the idea of asking that question to break it down. And this is disciplined questioning process, right? And it's established to establish truths, right? Getting rid of those underlying assumptions, right? And separate those knowledge from ignorance, right? And so the key to Socratic questioning, right, or the Socratic method, if you will, is the normal discussion, right? And normalizing it into the sense of where you're breaking things down again to the minimum. So how do you do this? So you clarify your questioning by explaining the origins of your ideas. So I know my friends and my wife for sure, they kind of get irritated with me a little bit sometimes when I'm going through the thinking process, when I really start deep thinking, because I go silent and I start thinking about the process, and I start thinking about the granular on it before I answer the question. And it does slow down the conversation a little bit, but that's the concept. That's the idea here. When you're deep thinking, you have to slow things down. And then you start to challenge all the assumptions that are out there. Right? How do I know this? How do I know this is true? Where is this truth coming from? Right? And what if you look at the opposite, or think about the opposite as well? And that's one of the things I do as well, is I search for things that are outside of what I normally think. What I mean by that is, if I think something is blue, I want to look for something in the argument of why it's red. Right? And then you start looking for evidence. So when you say, okay, you found what this is true, you found this issue to be true, look for the evidence that is going to back this up. But also, again, like I said, look for the sources that counter to it, and then you can really find out what your argument is. When you're writing this way, right, you're going to write the positive, you're going to write the counter argument to that, and then you're going to see why you are right? And you have to position yourself that way. And again, that's considering the alternate perspectives. And then examining that consequences, implications of what if you're wrong? What if the decisions that you're making are wrong, and what are the consequences if they are, right? And then go back and you question that original question, right? You're questioning the original question. I love that. So, why do you think that? Why were you correct? Right? And so that's testing. That's testing the system. And we do this when we plan, especially when we're planning for our business continuity and emergency management. We go through these steps, and then you test it out to see if the process is true or not. And if it's not true, right, then you go back to the drawing board, if you will, and rethink this. So the process stops you from relying on your gut, and it limits the strong emotional responses. And this helps you build something that lasts. And so one of the things I like to go through is the idea of thinking like a child, and it makes you a better thinker. So, if you think about, I have kids, and when they're like 4 or 5 years old, around that time, that's when they start getting these why questions. The why, right? And it gets to the point to where you say, just because. I've challenged my children to say, if I say just because, ask me why again, because I know it's my frustration coming out when I say this, right? But what it is children question everything. Everything that they see, they want to know why it works. They want to break things down to the granular level, right? They want to know exactly, how does toothpaste work? Right? Well, what does the brush of the teeth do? Why is that important? What's it do? And you have to explain to them exactly what's it do. So the idea of it's removing plaque from your teeth, and plaque is a bug, and blah, blah. So you go through the whole process with them, right? And the cool thing about children is they're genuine. They're very genuine with their ideas, right? They'll give you ideas about everything, whether it's washing the dishes or cooking or cutting the lawn or whatever. They have ideas as well that they want to share, and listen to them. And so as an adult, you should be the same way with your ideas. Look at things and throw different alternatives out there. Ask those why questions and the what ifs, and let's try this different direction. Again, it's the proverbial thinking outside of the box. And the other thing that I love about children is they're not afraid to change their minds. What I mean by this is that, like, we as adults, we get stuck in our ways, and we go, this is what it is. This is the way it's always been. This is the way it's always going to be. right? But kids are like, let's try something different, right? They can change their direction in mid-stride to get there, and you have to be more childlike in your thinking. And children see everything as an adventure. Their play is adventure. They're learning in their play. Why can't we do the same thing? When we're designing exercises and training, make it more, I don't say enjoyable, that's not the word I'm looking for, but make it more like an adventure, right? So people can get involved, and we are looking at ways to gamify our training. We're looking at ways to gamify our life. If you take a look at some of the stuff we do today, Google, Facebook, Amazon, all of those companies have learned to gamify their processes. We'll talk about that maybe in another episode. But the idea is gamify, make everything an adventure, make everything so where you're thinking outside the proverbial box again. So Elon Musk, like I said before, we'll get into him for a second here. So when you think about somebody who thinks this way, Elon Musk is that guy. The reason his genius is in there, not just because he's like one of the smartest people living on earth, which is true, but it's also because he really does think like a child. What I mean by that is he gamifies things. He asks the question why, and he's not afraid to change his mind. So Elon Musk in 2002 began his journey to Mars, but the problem he was thinking is, how do we get the people off the planet? All right, what are we using for a rocket ship? And so as he was going through the process, he realized that it wasn't the rocket that was the expense. There's research and development. There's all these other things that go into it, but it wasn't the actually building of the rocket. So that's why he created SpaceX, because he realized that he could save millions of dollars, right, on a rocket that they can shoot again, right? And so he did it. And those of us that follow Elon Musk have seen the rockets go up, get people to space, and then the rocket comes back down and is able to be used again. So that is the kind of thinking that he thinks about. He did not step out of that box saying, we can't do this, it can't be done, we've tried this other things. So came out thinking outside of the box, right? Using the Socratic method of reasoning, he has SpaceX was born, and we could do this better. So the first principles of thinking centers on, like I said, the deconstruction, right? And it really involves breaking down those things to the core elements. And so as the first principle, assumptions can't be reduced any further. So that's the idea here, is you bring it down to you cannot reduce it any further. And that's down to the core. And this is what we know is to be true, and are reasonable sure why it's true. So defining first principles thinking, right? The first principle is a basic assumption. And what it goes into here is the philosophy a little bit, and also science a little bit. So Rene Descartes, all right, the French philosopher and scientist who embraced this approach with the method, now calls it the Cartesian Doubt, which means systematically doubt everything you could possibly doubt until it was left what he saw was pure and audible truths. So this practice, we don't have to simplify every problem down to the atomic level, right? But what we need to do is get down a little bit deeper on everything that we think about. So let's imagine a couple things. John Boyd, all right, and we're going to have, actually next week, we're going to be talking more about John Boyd's OODA loop. But John Boyd, he breaks down things into a few simple things. And let's imagine this. There's a motorboat with a skier behind it, a military tank, and a bicycle. Now, if you break these parts down to its basic parts, the motorboat is the motor, the hull, the boat, a pair of skis, right? Obviously a person. The tank goes down to metal, tread, steel, armor plates, and a gun. And the bicycle has handlebars, wheels, gears, and a set. So that is the breaking things down. Now, what can we do when we take all those parts and bring them together? And John Boyd says, one of the options that you could do is make a snowmobile. And you do this by combining the handlebars, the seat of the bike, the metal tread of the tank, and the motor and the skis from the boat, right? So you're breaking the individual things down to the lowest level, and you're reconstructing them into something that's useful, right? In the sense of in the snow, right? For the snowmobile. So I just like that concept, that mental model, the mental game that you can play with yourself of breaking things down to it and then rebuilding it back up. So enjoying the simple principles in your daily life. Most of us have no problem thinking about what we want to achieve in life. At least when we're young, we're full of dreams and big ideas and boundless energy. The problem is that we let others tell us what is possible. And not only when it comes to our dreams, but also when it comes to when we go after them. And so when we take this, we apply this to emergency management, we allow people to box us in, right, of what we do as far as our job. But what we need to do is we need to start breaking out of that box, right? We need to let business continuity and emergency management be part of what we do on a daily basis. And I think that's the most important thing that we can take out of this is break things down to its molecular level, right? Breaking outside of the box and bringing other people into that process with us so they understand that emergency management isn't this abstract thing that's over onto the right-hand side of things, right? It's a very important thing that we have on a daily basis, and we use these plans, our business continuity plans and our emergency management plans, as something on a daily basis. Well, everybody, I want to thank you for being with us today. And I want you to visit Titan HST for all your communication needs. And remember to follow us on your favorite podcast player, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And join us. Until next week, stay safe and stay hydrated.